Hello from me, Curtis Hutchinson, and Philip Nothard to the first of this year's special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. Today's guest is here to talk about the biggest dealer group acquisition of 2022, which was announced during the closing weeks of the year. So a warm welcome back to friend of the podcast, Robert Forrester, CEO of Vertu Motors. Welcome back, Robert.
Thank you, Curtis. It's an absolute pleasure as usual. Nice to speak to you both.
Happy 2023.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Another year, right? Another year. Well, as Curtis said, it's fantastic to have you back on and welcome you back on, particularly this early on in the new year. But I think the back end of last year, we must sort of go back there for now and start to talk about, obviously, the Helston Garages Group acquisition, which, correct me if I'm wrong, was 28 outlets across 21 locations, subsequently 8 brands in the southwest. And does that now take you making the biggest dealer group acquisition of the year? I don't think there's last year anything bigger, was there, Robert?
Well, with dash out of action, no.
We better not talk about that, Dash. It's be due up soon, won't it? So, do you want to talk us through a little bit about it? Obviously, it hit the headlines. It hit the headlines for quite a while because obviously there's quite a few moving parts in the whole deal of the Helston Garages sale. But obviously from yourself in terms of that acquisition and obviously what you decided to do in terms of the addition and of the brands that you all represent and new brands that you don't represent as well.
Yeah, well, we're obviously aware of the business. My chairman, Andy Goss, knew the family, and obviously it was quite unfortunate that closing stages of the previous year and early stages of the last year, the 2 owners, who were a married couple, actually passed away in fairly quick succession, which then obviously led to a strategic review. And we expressed an interest. A number of our manufacturer partners contacted us as well and said we were interested. In fairness, we'd already sort of made contact. And then there was a process run through, which we were fortunate enough to be successful in. It was an acquisition we did want to do for geographical reasons and franchise reasons. And I think we've been highlighting that with a very conservative balance sheet, we wanted to undertake a significant transaction. And in reality, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've looked at all kinds of different permutations of scaled transaction. And actually, when it came down to it, it is a very important acquisition for us, and it's certainly our largest acquisition we've done to date. But we never actually use the word transformational, because actually, if you look in terms of scale, it added 28 outlets to what we already had to give us 192, and with 4 billion turnover, and this gave us another 500 or 600 million. So it probably wasn't transformational in the truest sense. The word transformational is you've got 160 dealerships and you get another 160 dealerships. But that doesn't mean it's not important. And the entire focus of our business over the next 6 months will be on integrating, rebranding the Helston business. Actually, I think we start today. I think the Peugeot dealerships are in the process. I think they're about to flick the switch to our systems and Bristol Street Motors branding, etc., etc. And then over the next 4 months, everything will pretty well follow suit.
And with this last time you were on the podcast, we talk about targets and things like this and chase to be positioned, but you, as you say, it's just whatever opportunities present themselves, etc. But does this then take you in terms of the third largest group in terms of revenue? Is that correct?
We suspect it does, but it's difficult to get visibility on what everybody else is doing, isn't it? And remember that a lot of the players in the top 10 aren't quoted UK companies. So actually the visibility is not great, but I suspect it does in reality.
Yeah. And that's the thing with it, isn't it? It's like you say, it's strategically in terms of that geographic coverage across that southwest. Is that a very key move for you in terms of
Yeah,
that
it is. I mean, if
Central
you
area?
think about the Vertu brand, which is the premium brand, we're very strong in the Northeast. We're very strong in Yorkshire. We're strong in the East Midlands. We've got an outpost in Hereford, and then that's it. So that explains really why only 8% of the UK population have actually heard of Vertu, whereas it's 54% in terms of Bristol Street Motors. So to go and take a whole territory from Land's End to broadly Salisbury Plain and saturate it with Vertu Motors dealerships where we can have TV marketing, extra chief sponsorship, etc., will grow brand awareness, will make Vertu Motors the biggest brand, and will, I think, be good for us.
And Robert, in terms of the acquisition, you've obviously managed a number of acquisitions over the years now. I'm just wondering how complicated this one was, because there were two other vendors involved, with Yeomans buying the VW Group side of the Helston business
Yeah,
and Rybrook buying the Porsche business. So
yeah.
did that make it more complicated
I
than
think this was the
normal?
single most complicated transaction ever in the history of motor retail. I think if you ask David Kendrick, he'd definitely think that. I
Yeah,
mean, to be honest, it pushed my intellectual prowess to the edge from an accounting perspective to actually work out the structure of a deal. Bear in mind that we bought the business based on the August balance sheet
yeah,
and then ended up pre-selling 10 or 11 dealerships in two separate transactions 2 months later. I mean, think about a month before the deal, I sat in a darkened room and convinced myself that the structure didn't work, and it didn't. So I had to persuade everybody I was right. So it was really quite complicated, actually, in terms of how to actually structure it. Now, there were a lot of willing parties. I have to say, Yeomans were good to deal with, Rybrook were good to deal with, the Helston management were good to deal with. There was a willingness of all parties. And actually, if one party hadn't been willing in the most complicated transaction I've ever seen, it would never have gone.
yeah.
So there was a lot of pieces had to be put in place.
And it was reported that the acquisition took 9 months from start to finish. How would that compare with what you're typically used to?
Well, what we're typically used to, much longer, albeit, you can have a cup of coffee with somebody and you'll still be talking 5 years later, can't you?
Yeah.
That happens to me all the time, actually. But in terms of actually, yes, I'd like to buy it. This is how I think we'd do it. It was 9 months, which is quite a lengthy process, actually. But the world's complicated, isn't it? And if you look at the Marshall Cinch deal, that seemed to go on for an absolute age as well. FCA involvement does elongate matters somewhat, but no, this was a long time coming, but it was done correctly by all the parties, and I think was done in good order, really.
And I mean, you touched on it earlier in terms of that, the next stage now of this integration, the rebranding. I mean, you've got obviously a significant project now to
Yes,
sort of take on. 770 new
yes.
members of staff colleagues. You've got IT systems and everything else to start working on. I mean, how long is it that it will take before this sort of acquisition starts to be sort of earnings enhancing, and how long does this
Well, I mean, I think
take on?
it's a profitable business, so it'll be earnings enhancing, bar seasonality. Obviously, buying something for December, January, and February is never clever, is it? But it's a profitable business, so it will be profitable in its first 12 months of ownership. But you're right; it's a hell of a project to get it, in our group. I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time down there. All our senior team are spending quite a bit of time down there. We did a morning's induction actually before we bought the business, which was hilarious. So I was actually talking to 90 managers before we actually bought the business, and I actually toured every dealership and visited every dealership before we bought it, which is quite unusual actually. But now we can get in, and the management are found to be fantastic down there. Actually, very receptive. And I was very pleased when I went out and done all the dealerships. I thought they were a significant opportunity, and
some fantastic businesses.
And as you said, it's quite a broad area as well, isn't it?
It's a long way from living in the northeast. You don't grasp it, do you?
No, as I say, it's to get there in the first place and then to do the coverage as well.
Was an interesting one. I actually flew down on the Thursday night and then arranged a series of dinners with management. And I thought, right, I'll go and see every dealership. I went to every dealership over the summer incognito without sort of going in just to look. But then obviously, I then went and met everybody. What I didn't realise was about 80% of the dealerships actually shut on a Sunday. I penciled in to go around a chunk of them on a Sunday, so it led to quite a interesting geographical.
You didn't go in your undercover outfit from the TV program, did you?
No, I didn't. But I did actually do 7 of my own dealerships on Saturday without telling anybody I was going in Nottingham, which was. It's always interesting when you land 200 mile away from home when you're not meant to be there. That's
when everyone takes a second look. Is that Robert? And then everyone starts scuttling
around. It's a look of dread when the Range Rover arrives.
Sure, I've just seen Robert's Range Rover in the car park. Is that? Yeah, one of them. Yeah, been there and done it. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Now, Robert, a key part of this acquisition is, as well as increasing representation with several of your existing partners, you're also debuting with Volvo with 4 sites and Ferrari with 1 site. So how important was it for you to have those brands in the portfolio?
Yeah, well, we used to have Volvo actually, and we exited it quite a few years ago. But we've always we exited on good relations, which is always important. So I've kept quite close to them, and it was a brand I think that's come a long way. I think it's a very, very good brand. So actually, that was one of the easier manufacturer consents, if I'm honest. I think they saw it as a good fit. We saw it as a good fit. That was really interesting. They are very, very good businesses in the Southwest for Volvo. We're very, very pleased. So I think it's great to get that premium brand in. We've got a bit of learning to do, but there is a very good director down there who runs Volvo dealerships. So I think that helps us immeasurably. Ferrari is obviously completely new to us. And actually, my chairman got me a book to read on Ferrari before I went to see them to ask for permission. Which I did indeed read. My daughter probably knew more about Ferrari than I did, but I'm learning fast. And it's a great business at Exeter. It's a pretty well brand new dealership in Exeter for Ferrari, and we're very excited. And actually, I think, albeit it's a very different franchise to anything else we run, there are bits I think we can bring to it, and I think we're interested in sitting down with Ferrari and going through that. For running events for the high net worth individuals. So I think there's some quite interesting ideas we've got, and I'm looking forward to sitting down with them in the next couple of weeks and exchanging ideas, actually.
And another interesting aspect of representation is you've grown your BMW Motorrad motorcycle business to 4 sites now. So really consolidating your position as the biggest UK partner.
No, that's right. And we're in discussions with them to open another one. So yes, it is. Bikes are an important division for us. We don't want too many brands. I think we're one of the largest Honda retailers. We're now the largest BMW retailers. We could probably add another brand. But, we are very focused on making sure we run very good bike dealerships. And we've got a lot of work to do to integrate and get up and running the ones we did in Yorkshire, which are very large businesses before Christmas. And we've got a year of consolidation, I think, in the bikes business.
But strategically, an important part of the business for you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think, there's bits the bike business can learn from the car business, but there's actually bits from the bike business can teach the car business. I'm almost coming to the conclusion we're getting into the entertainment business, really. If you actually sit down in a Ferrari business discussing it with management, and you sit down in bikes business, you actually understand that, the customer experience, which everyone talks about customer experience, but it's really entertainment, making unique moments And I think we've got a lot to learn in the core car business actually about that, of making things special.
Because that is definitely in the bike business, since it is a
Gotta be.
it's a special
Absolutely.
purchase, isn't it? It's an aspirational special purchase.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
Conscious of time and 3 big subjects that have been the market at the minute, and I had the pleasure of listening to you being interviewed on the BBC Radio 4, was I think over the Christmas period. I think you were on there and other areas, but just get your view on where you see the market heading in terms of the supply of vehicles now, new vehicles, as we sort of head into this early part of the new year. We finished off last year 1.61 million, 2% behind the pre-year, still a bit behind the sort of pre-pandemic levels. And there's reports of some production starting to recover, obviously very much brand specific. What's your sort of outlook for this year on production recovery now and vehicle supply?
Well, barring a Chinese invasion of Taiwan,
it could be a problem for quite a few things.
You've got to think that there's going to be a recovery. Certainly, I think the Volkswagen brands look to be seeing better supply. Certainly saw that in Q4. I think there's still pressure in Stellantis, for sure. Ford seems pretty good. So you can go through each of the manufacturers and you come out with a lot more positives than negatives, I think, on supply. I don't think it's going to race away rampantly. And I think the mix will be interesting, because I think there's certainly a slowdown in electric vehicle thinking, as would be inevitable. Cost of living increases, pressure, the cost of electric vehicles are high, the fueling of them's high. And we've, you keep reporting, and I think you're absolutely right. There is a problem in used car electric vehicles for me, certainly near the new ones. So I think it could be quite an interesting year, but I think the supply side should improve without destroying used car values.
And I think used cars is holding up. You'd think we're more of the same around used cars. I think that seems to be the general view.
Yeah, because I don't think. I mean, we used to have a 2.6 million new car market. We're now 1.5.
Yeah,
and there's that massive gap, isn't there? Built up now over a number of years, which is going to last 3 or 4 or 5 years. So I'm pleased with franchise dealers, because a lot of the manufacturers' strategies around used cars are about closed loop retailing and keeping used cars within the franchise network rather than selling them external to the franchise network. So I think that helps franchise dealers. Certainly part exchanges are going to be helpful. We're going retailing quite deep in used cars. So we're keeping more of the used cars we bring in part exchange. The issue I think the industry has generally is there'll be better new car supply. That might have a slight lower effect on margin. Used cars should remain stable in terms of pricing. You can't imagine margins going up. I think margins will stabilise, if not slightly reduce. But every British business is getting battered by cost increases.
Yeah.
And then how does that all play out? Wage inflation, energy costs, rates revaluations. I spoke on the BBC about that. And
you did, yeah.
And you've got to put it all together and see where we end up. And it's quite a challenging position, and no surprises there, I don't think, to anybody. And I think that will make for quite a challenging environment. I think H1, well, inflation's coming down. That's the good thing. Employment levels remain high. And I think, yes, this is a year of battling for operational excellence. If you haven't got operational excellence, then I think you're going to really struggle. And we will be into seeking consistency, making sure that we are as streamlined as possible, that our organisational structure is as clear, that what we're trying to achieve is clear, that we've got unity of purpose, and battle productivity increases against the cost base.
And Robert, we couldn't have you on without asking you about agency, because obviously you've got a growing portfolio of volume and premium brand partners, some of whom are adopting agency. Mercedes have gone live this month, some of whom won't. Renault have said that they won't go agency. What does this mean to you operationally as a group, having some who are following agency and some who aren't?
Not a lot of difference, to be honest with you. The Mercedes agency seems to have started well. We're selling cars on it. So the systems all work, I think. So I think that's positive. My only real fear with agency, apart from, there's two fears of agency, aren't there? One is it being used to reduce our margins and make us net worth off. And clearly we've got to worry about that. But that's certainly not my understanding currently at the moment. And does it mean I can't utilise my group systems? Because frankly, we put a lot of investment into our group systems. It is actually how we run the business. We monitor everything, and that's how we can run nearly 200 dealerships or outlets. So they are the two areas that I think we need to be aware of. But I mean, I'm very happy with how Mercedes has gone. I think the implementation was excellent. And we will see how we get on as we roll the others out.
Yeah, I think it's just like you say, it's just a matter of time, isn't it? I think there's a lot of things happening. I mean, you mentioned before with the rates reevaluation, there's the energy bill relief scheme and everything else that's going on. And like you say, it's and we've still got to get through some kind of production registration recovery as well, haven't we? So there's a lot going on to get your head around.
There is, and there's, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if agency is going to be a success or not, whether other people follow or not. Some people might say they're going to do it, but actually look at it and maybe not do it. I think there's not a lot to get really worked up about. This year is actually about making sure the businesses are fighting fit and we know what we're doing and we do the best possible we can.
And that was going to be the final question, was what's on the agenda for Vertu Motors in 2023. But I think you might have sort of answered it there in terms of that sort of operational excellence is a key focus. You've obviously got a big job in terms of Helston.
I did actually write a personal plan for this year over Christmas. Helston integration, making sure the business is fit, that we have an organisational structure that works, that we don't have too many layers, we have clarity of communication, that we are looking at productivity gains, use of technology, making sure we're doing things that actually make sense, that we manage the cost base as best we can. And we have to make sure that we are doing things that customers want us to do and that customers are willing to pay for, because that is the point. So there's a number of things. I think I've got 7 different things that I'm going to focus on this year. One of them is development of people, making sure we've got the next generation of senior managers and leaders, directors coming through, and I'll be spending a lot of time on that in the next 12 months. So yeah, I've got a plan. I just need to do it.
Still the rest of the year yet.
Yeah.
Thanks, Robert.
Well, I think we've had this conversation before. I mean, for the first 3 weeks of January, I get locked in a room doing business plan reviews of each of the divisions. So I've done the Honda, Kia, Toyota business plan review today, which is a great opportunity to start off the year with, right, where are we? What do we need to do? What decisions need to be made? And I quite enjoy it, albeit it is brutal. In terms of, you get no downtime at all. It's full on for the first 3 weeks. So hence why I went to dealerships on Saturday for some light relief.
Put them under pressure instead.
Spread it around.
Yeah. I mean, it remains, fantastic acquisition. I think, heading into this year with a clear plan, not necessarily New Year's resolution, but a clear plan for Vertu Motors Group. And, you've obviously got a lot on, but, a lot of focus on the right areas. So thanks for coming back on, Robert, and
absolutely
well, and thanks for sharing insight with us today. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Robert. And many thanks for joining us for the first of this year's special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcasts, sponsored by eBay Motors Group. We'll be having more interviews with industry bosses and analysts over the coming weeks and months. Thanks once again to Robert for joining us today. We're back again with the headlines next weekend. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.